Hello there, and welcome to another episode of the Ted in Your Head podcast. I hope that your 2026 is off to a good start. My 2026 so far has been a little rough, for one thing. Got a little under the weather at the tail end of this, I'm happy to say. And there's some other things that happened that I'll share in future podcasts. But I thank you for tuning in this podcast. We seek to free ourselves from those things that would stop us. I'm talking about limitation thinking, a feeling of lack, no energy, which I call lethargy. And once we move those blocks out of the way, we can pursue what I like to call a powerful path to personal transformation, something that we need to work on daily. And if that is something that you're interested in, I will offer you a complimentary half-hour phone consultation. We can talk about your situation, find out if hypnotherapy is right for you. And if you hang out to the end of this podcast episode, I will tell you how to get in touch with me at the end of our podcast today. But for now, let's get into the topic of today, which is, do you want to be happy? Be generous. And again, like I usually like to do, I'll start with a story from my own life. So I've just turned 66 years old. Just even saying that sounds kind of strange. 66 years old. And I find out that at this stage of my life, I look back a lot. I reflect on not only my life and the things that have happened, but certainly for this podcast, I reflect on the things that I've learned. So today I wanted to share with you one of the most important lessons that I ever learned. When I was in college, I got a job selling books door to door. This is a very, very difficult job. The promise was that you could make more money in 3 months in a summer than you could make the whole year working part-time and going to school. So I did that, but didn't really like the experience of selling stuff, especially not door to door. That was very hard, and I felt some of the sales techniques were a bit manipulative, but I was good at sales, and so I went on to have a lot of sales jobs, door-to-door, in-home presentations, as well as working in retail spaces like, shops and malls and stuff like that. Towards the end of my sales career, I had one sales job where the managers and the owners of the company drove expensive sports cars. They wore expensive watches and expensive suits, and it was all flashy and showy about how much money they were making. And admittedly, as a young man, I got caught up in that. I wanted that. So I did that for a while, and I found out some things about the company that made me not want to work for them anymore. So I quit, and then I was broke for a while and also really unhappy. In fact, I was so disillusioned with that measure of success, sport cars and watches and suits and, all of the outward trappings of success. I just got very disillusioned with that. And believe it or not, I actually considered becoming a monk, which I did not do. And consequently, it was about that time that I got into a relationship. And shortly after, this relationship didn't last very long, shortly after, I endured a very painful breakup, which I've talked a lot about in this podcast and in my blogs. I learned a lot from that period of my life. It was one of the most painful things I've ever been through, but one of the most educational things I've ever been through. And one of the things I learned was that I was often selfish. I was always asking, what can I get? What's in it for me? So at that point in my life, I looked back and I saw with great clarity how many people had helped me, not only financially, but emotionally as well. There was a lot of people there for me. I may have been selfish, but I wasn't a jerk. I've always been a pleasant, decent person. But I was caught up in my own head under the hypnosis of, what's in it for me? I want this, I want that. And I saw no reason for these people to help me other than the fact that they wanted to help. They were generous. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that these people, they were happy. They were content. None of them were wealthy. They were just generous. And I realized that the happiest people I knew were people that were happy giving. Giving without expecting anything in return. And so, instead of asking at that point, instead of always asking what's in it for me, I started to ask, how can I help you? What can I do for you? What can I give you? I started donating money to a children's charity. This was probably in '85. And that was a real turning point in my life. I didn't have a lot of money, but it felt good to give a little bit of money every month to children that didn't have what I had. In fact, the habit was so impactful in my life that I still donate to that charity 40 years later. And life started getting better. And I realized that it's true. The reason for living is giving. I believe that we're here to contribute. And I believe each of us has our own unique contribution that only we can give. Did you know there's a science of generosity? Turns out we are wired to be generous. Do you want to be happier? If so, be generous. Research shows that if you give your money and time away, you'll be happier for it. Giving creates wealth and happiness by triggering rewards in our brain, reducing stress, fostering an abundance mindset that attracts opportunities. Generosity, the act of being generous, releases dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin, which reduces stress and gives us what some people call a helper's high. Giving without expecting anything in return builds trust as well as a good reputation. Do you think that could help your career? Do you think that can create stronger relationships? Maybe even better financial returns? Of course. There's an article on the website lifeusa.org, and the link is in the blog post or the show notes. And this article states, and I quote, "Research from the Social Capital Community Benchmark Survey shows that this connection between giving and earning is more than one way. In fact, if you give just $100 more than your neighbor this year, you might see as much as an extra $375 in your income next year. That's a 275% return on investment. It's not too shabby for something that also makes you feel good inside." And the article further goes on to state, a 2009 study by the National Bureau of Economic Research found that charitable giving leads to higher income. For every dollar you give to charity, you can expect to make approximately $3.75 in return on average. And lastly, the article goes on to say that studies show that generous people are 43% more likely to say that they're happy compared to those who don't give, according to the Harvard Business School. So this was taken from an article on lifeusa.org. And the good news is, it could be as simple as holding the door for someone, or buying a cup of coffee for the person behind you in line. The science is in. One of the simplest ways to increase your happiness is practicing generosity. And if you want to do a deeper dive into this subject, listen to the February 19th, 2024 episode of the 10% Happier podcast with Dan Harris. This is a very popular podcast. I listen to it quite often. And it goes on to say in this podcast, the science of generosity is why it makes you happier and how to do it effectively, and it doesn't need to involve money. So that's the title of this particular podcast, The Science of Generosity, why it makes you happier, how to do it effectively, and it doesn't need to involve money. And the link to that particular episode, again, is in the blog post to this podcast. We're happier when we're thinking about how to help others, rather than thinking about ourselves and our own problems. If someone comes into my hypnotherapy office and says, I want to make more money, first thing I'll suggest is to start donating money. Even if it's just $5 a month, start giving money away to a charity that you feel is important to you. And even, as some research suggests, a charity where you know exactly where your money is going and how it's being spent. If someone comes in and tells me I'm having trouble being free from my grief or my loss, I'll suggest that they volunteer to help others that are grieving. And if somebody comes in and says that they feel that their life has no purpose or meaning, I'll suggest that they find a way to give, find a way to be generous. Everyone can be great because everyone can serve. Martin Luther King Jr. said that. It's hard. We're caught up in our own problems. We are struggling to make ends meet. Many times we feel we don't have the time to be generous, or we don't have the time to donate money. But back then, when I was struggling, I managed to come up with that little bit of money every month. And everything inside of me said, you can't afford this. You can't afford to donate money. You're not rich. You can't even pay your credit card bill. But when I started giving money away, everything just started getting better. So I'll leave you with that. And if you're struggling with the resistance to be generous, if you're struggling to think about others instead of yourself, give me a call, send me an email, go to my website, tedmoreno.com, click on the contact menu, reach out, and we'll have a half-hour phone consultation. We'll talk about your situation, how to help you, and if you're ready, we'll schedule your first hypnotherapy session and begin to get your subconscious mind on board, because prosperity and abundance is a daily consistent action, and it's a mindset. And if we have that mindset that I can afford to give, whether it's time or money, if we have that mindset, that vibration attracts more into our life. And I'm happy to say that I've experienced that myself. So thank you so much for listening to this today. I'll be dropping another podcast in another week. And I think I'm coming to the end of weekly podcasts. I'll talk about that in some future episodes. But for now, thanks so much for tuning in. Take good care of yourself, and if you can, take care of somebody else. Bye now.